Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. My name is George Burke, and for the next hour, we are pleased to have the chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, Jerry Conley. Jerry, welcome
George,
to the show.
Great to be with you.
Jerry's in election this year. He's facing a Republican who's not well known, but has been a little bit aggressive so far. I don't know if he's telling the truth, but he is certainly making some noise. Jerry, you've become a household name around Fairfax and Northern Virginia, based on your good deeds over the last dozen years or so. Give the viewers a little perspective on your history and who you are, where you went to school, and what you're doing.
Well, I have lived in metropolitan Washington now for 35 years, 30 of those years in Fairfax, and I really got involved politically. I was working on the Hill. I had gotten out of graduate school. I got my master's at the Kennedy School up at Harvard, and came down here, worked for 10 years in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but was always involved in my neighborhood at night. And I became the president of my civic association, and we had an environmental catastrophe that occurred with the Pickett Road tank fire, where we had an oil plume that crossed Pickett Road and devastated my neighborhood. And you know, when I was first elected president, maybe we'd get 65 people if we were lucky at a civic association meeting. After the oil was discovered, we averaged 900 people per meeting. And you know, people were very worried about benzene and exposure to carcinogens. Pregnant women very worried about the effect on their babies, their future babies. People with immune problems worried about illness. Property values, all kinds of things. And so managing that really was an object lesson in how government does or does not work well. And frankly, the only government entity that responded well, not the federal government, not the state government, certainly not some of our neighboring jurisdictions, but Fairfax County, the fire department and the political leadership really responded and actually tried to work with us. And that taught me a real lesson in terms of how important local government is when something goes wrong. And something we were just reminded of down at Katrina. So that led me to continue my involvement in the community. I became the Federation of Citizens Association president, and then in '95, when the Providence District Supervisor seat opened up, I decided I'd give it a try, and I've been involved now for almost 13 years in the Board of Supervisors, and I love local government. I love what I do.
Well, we've both seen Fairfax grow a great deal, even during the period of your tenure. I mean, it's grown economically. It's grown in diversity. It's grown in reputation. And I would suggest a lot of that is a credit to your leadership and to the entire board in terms of how they have worked to make Fairfax a #1 county. Let's get right into it. The issue you probably hear on the lips of most citizens is transportation. And we finally saw the legislature pass a transportation bill after 20 years, I think was the last time they passed one. Some folks have some real problems with it. There's certainly some issues with it. I think we all agree it's not enough. From a local perspective, knowing that there are certain strictures placed on county government, for our viewing audience, one of the things that impacts county government is the Dillon rule, which means that county governments, there's only certain things they can do. They need to have the authority of the legislature to do other things. And sometimes
we call it Mother May I.
Right. And sometimes the voters and the citizens don't understand there are certain things that county government can't do that you would like to do, but you're hamstrung by this law. Some of us would like to see that law changed in the future, but I think it's not. We're not going to see it in the close-in future. But let's talk about transportation a little bit. You know, what has been done? What can Fairfax do? And certainly, as a regional leader, what are you pushing in that direction?
Well, you know, your discussion of the Dillon rule is very correct, George. And we have to remember that in Virginia, the state decided that transportation would be a state responsibility by statute in 1932. So for the last 75 years, it is primarily a state responsibility, and therein lies the problem, because we live in a state that frankly is often very slow to make the public investments that are necessary, especially in infrastructure. You pointed out rightly that the last big transportation bill in the General Assembly to pump investment into infrastructure was 1986. So they're on sort of an extended cicada cycle in actually getting things done in transportation. And so as a result, more and more of the burden falls on our budget and on our local taxpayers to try to do something about transportation. And we have. When I got elected chairman, I laid out a 4-year transportation plan that put the first transportation bond referendum on the ballot in 15 years, passed overwhelmingly. 78% of our voters voted for it. We have a second transportation bond referendum coming on the ballot this November as well. We will have pumped about $600 million of local money and obligations into transportation in this 4-year time period for what's a state responsibility. But the transportation plan I laid out, no one's going to cure congestion, but we can make it better and we can provide more choices for people. That's why telework is so important. Getting rail in the Dulles Corridor is so important, and ultimately in the I-66 corridor. Expanding rail opportunities in Columbia Pike and in the Richmond Highway corridor. Looking at things like hot lanes in the Beltway that will add capacity and give people a choice. They don't have to use, but they can. And making improvements and investments in the existing infrastructure. We've widened 123 down to the Occoquan and built a new Occoquan bridge. We completed the Springfield Mixing Bowl project this year, making a big difference. We're going to open up the second span of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge next year. We've got one missing piece of the County Parkway that will be completed within the next 2 years by the U.S. Army, paid for by the state. We're building 10 interchanges, 6 of which are now completed on Route 28, which is going to have a huge impact positive in terms of getting people moving again on Route 28. So there's a lot we can and are doing. But the notion that there's one magic bullet that's going to cure congestion, there isn't. The other side of transportation is land use. We have to change the patterns of land use, because if we continue to do what we've always done, we're going to always get what we always got. So transit-oriented development around transit stations and transit nodes, critical to changing the patterns of commuting and land use in Fairfax County.
It shocks me. I've heard your opponent and other Republicans argue more highways, more, rail isn't going to work, more highways, forget Metro, let's just keep putting money into pavement. It strikes me as an impossibility. We don't have places to put those highways other than to do some expansion, as you speak, to the ones that we already have. And with an affluent society we have, many people have more cars than they need in their yards. Why promote more people going into their cars and creating more gridlock? I mean, certainly everybody has the choice, but I just cannot understand some of these specious arguments that transit doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's just proven that it's worked.
Absolutely, especially here. I mean, and in fact, we don't face a Sophie's choice here. We need to make investments in both. But transit is a critical piece of getting people out of their cars, and enormous public investment that pays off in terms of congestion improvement and air quality improvement. The Texas Transportation Institute that just came out with a study a week ago that said we're the second most congested region, metropolitan region, not just Fairfax, in the country. The one thing that positively impacts that congestion and saves people time, transit.
I noticed Ireland had,
million.
it was in the Post today, and I noticed Ireland had lower air pollution than we had here in Washington.
Probably right. but Metropolitan Washington saves 25.7 million hours a year because of transit in congestion time that otherwise would have been spent in those automobiles.
No doubt, no doubt. Let's move on to the environment. You talked a little bit about your neighborhood and what you dealt with the Pickett Road flume and that discharge. I remember that, and it was a serious, serious problem. What have you done on the environment in Fairfax, and what needs to be done?
When I became chairman, I laid out a 20-year plan for the county that was adopted subsequently by the board unanimously to look at the 6 major areas of the environment, everything from water quality and air quality, solid waste to land stewardship. And I've been very gratified the board's fully supported that effort. We've dedicated a penny on the tax rate, not a new tax, but a penny on the existing tax rate for environmental cleanup in the water area, especially stormwater. We're looking at all 30 watersheds in the county to improve them and to improve the water quality in them with action plans. We're restoring streams and stream beds. We've expanded riparian buffers to protect those streams and to prevent development from getting too close to our watersheds. We're improving the quality of water we're putting into the Chesapeake Bay. We lead the region in terms of air quality mitigation measures to try to improve our air quality here in Fairfax County. Land stewardship, I set as a goal for the Park Authority. Let's get to 10% of the entire land mass of Fairfax County being parkland. So 1 out of 10 acres by the time we're finished with this plan will be parkland. And that's a really, that's over 30,000 acres of land. That's a very signal accomplishment, and we're very close to achieving that goal already. Earlier this year, I expanded on the environmental plan and announced something called the Cool Counties Initiative. And that initiative is designed to try to change the carbon footprint, the greenhouse gas emissions we have here in Fairfax, and to encourage other counties to follow our lead. We came up with a 16-page template of actions that we can take. And that includes switching to hybrid vehicles. It includes switching to CFL light bulbs to use less energy. It includes expanding the tree canopy in Fairfax County. Our tree canopy, we talk a lot about the loss of trees. It depends on what point of time we're talking about. I mean, there weren't a lot of trees here in the Civil War because a lot of our trees were torn down for Confederate housing, and along the Potomac, all the trees were stripped down to avoid sniper activity.
And a lot of farmland, and then there was a lot
and
of
a lot of
farmland
farmland,
too.
exactly. But if you look at, say, from 1970 on, we've lost a lot of tree canopy since 1970 because of the big burst of development that occurred in the 70s and 80s. So can we go back in and try to restore some of that lost tree cover? Well, right now we're at 41% tree canopy in Fairfax County. If we do nothing, it's going to drop to 37%. So can we prevent that from happening, and can we add to it? And so my goal is to try to get to 45%. That's going to mean planting millions of trees over the next 25 years. But trees are very efficient sequesters of carbon dioxide and can really make a difference in terms of mitigating the effects of pollution and greenhouse gases specifically. So at any rate, the Cool County Initiative is really, I think, making a difference, and it's been very warmly received all over the United States. We had a national launch for this plan, started in Fairfax. It's our template. And we already have about 24 counties all around the United States, from the West Coast to the East, North and South, signing on, representing about 35 million Americans. So it's a very exciting concept. We're working with the Sierra Club. We've already received national recognition for that initiative. We won an award, a national award for the environmental initiative. That's the first time we've ever won a national award in Fairfax for our environmental initiative. So we've gone from being sort of a laggard in the region to actually being at the cutting edge of environmental innovation, and I'm very proud of that.
And I might add, I attended the Chamber of Commerce debate recently here in Fairfax County, and I saw prior to that debate that you received the endorsements of both the Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters. And I think of all the environmental groups, those two tend to be the most responsible and truly look at the issues before they make a decision. They don't make any kind of what one might call knee-jerk decision. They're very practical
thorough.
and thorough in terms of how they do things.
Yeah.
I've had dealings with them in the past, so I congratulate you on that.
Thank you. Yeah, all of the environmental groups who endorse in this election have endorsed my candidacy for re-election, and I'm proud to juxtapose my environmental record against that of my opponent.
Well, I was in my backyard early this afternoon, and 4 deer showed up coming out of the woods next to my house. And yesterday, my wife and I had lunch out there, and we had a lot of company. We leave the backyard sort of natural, and I think they like the clover this time of year. It keeps them away from the ornamental plants. Folks, we're going to take a break in a second. I urge you to call in at 571-749-1166. This is Inside Scoop, Virginia. My name is George Burke, and our guest today is Fairfax County Board Chairman Jerry Connolly.
Some people in Fairfax County don't know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors, your friends,
or your family.
People who want to share ideas,
opinions,
Cultures,
lifestyles,
art,
sports, music,
events, entertainment,
history,
science,
beliefs,
people who want to learn about television,
producing,
directing,
cameras, audio,
lighting,
editing, or radio, talk, music.
whatever you think people should hear.
Public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
And it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
whatever it is.
You can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people,
By the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's Earthshare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Scoop, Virginia. My name is George Burke. Our guest today is Fairfax County Board Chairman Jerry Connolly, up for re-election this year. I'm pleased to have him. We're old friends and colleagues. I urge you to call in. You got a hard question for Jerry? I'm sure he can answer it. The phones are open, 571-749-1166. Jerry, Fairfax has received, we talked a little bit about some of the awards they received in the environmental area. Fairfax has received a lot of awards in terms of its management, et cetera, and you and the board yourself have won some awards relative to the board's agenda. I think it's called the 6-point agenda.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I got elected chair, George, I laid out a 6-point agenda on gang prevention, the preservation of affordable housing, education excellence, and early childhood learning especially. The environmental plan I talked about, tax diversification, and the 4-year transportation plan. And we have won awards in every one of those, and every aspect of that, by the Boys and Girls Club, by Catholics for Housing, and Wesley Housing, and A-Home on housing, our affordable housing initiatives. We won the State Transit Administration Award for Outstanding Leadership in Transportation, and last year won the American Public Transit Association Award for National Leadership in Transportation. This year we won an award with the National Association of Regional Councils as the outstanding local elected official of the United States for regional leadership. So the agenda is really receiving lots of acknowledgement from our professional peers. And of course, Fairfax County, as you know, was designated a few years ago as the best managed county in the United States.
I know that.
We're one of only a handful of jurisdictions, local jurisdictions, that maintains a AAA bond rating in Wall Street, which is really something very important. It saves taxpayers millions of dollars a year when we go to finance capital projects.
Fairfax is larger than a number of states. I think it's like 6 or 7 states or something that it's larger than.
We're closing in on Rhode Island, too.
Yeah. You're running, in many ways, you're running a very diverse economy that rivals some states in terms of its output and in terms of the budget even.
Yeah.
One of the areas that's near and dear to me, I was privileged to spend 15 years working for the International Association of Firefighters. And in fact, the current general president of the International Association of Firefighters started his career right in Fairfax County.
That's right.
And Fairfax has always had a top, in the firefighter business, Fairfax has always had one of the top-rated fire departments in the country. Just as I think the police department here in Fairfax has also been always rated very highly. Let's talk about public safety a little bit. It sometimes gets short shrift. People don't realize the amount of work that goes into having departments of this caliber and what it means to the citizens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the investments we've made as citizens in public safety have really paid off. As you mentioned, in terms of firefighting, our response time is well under 6 minutes for every incident. We have a internationally recognized fire department with a special urban search and rescue team that goes all over the world, paid for by the federal government.
One of only two that's authorized to go.
And when Turkey had an earthquake, when Iran had an earthquake, down in Peru and Mexico, of course, after Katrina, our urban search and rescue team gets called up by the federal government to go and help. Specially trained, incredible expertise, and that expertise is available to our citizens every day of the week. It is a world-class fire department that we can all be proud of and saves lives every day. Likewise, our police department, we have the lowest of the 50 largest jurisdictions in the United States. Fairfax County ranks last in its crime rate, the lowest crime rate of the 50 largest jurisdictions by far. And last year we hit a 32-year low here in Fairfax County, even though we already had the lowest crime rate. And you look at any index, we're making enormous progress. In the 4 years since we started the gang prevention initiative, for example, in terms of public safety, we've cut in half the percentage of kids identifying themselves as having been involved in a gang from about 5.6% to 2.8% of our high school and middle school kids. So cutting that in half, big progress. In terms of the gang-related crime rate, there's a report that just came out a little over a week ago. We've seen a 32% decline in gang-related crime in Fairfax County in this 3-year time period since I started the gang prevention initiative. So we're making incredible progress. And of course, then there's another aspect to this too, George, and that's emergency preparedness. We now live in a post 9/11 world where we have to be ready for any eventuality. And if you think about how we've been hard hit in this region, we had the 9/11 attack on the Pentagon, the second worst terrorist attack in American history, only eclipsed by the World Trade Center. We had the anthrax attacks shortly after that. We had the sniper attacks. We had Hurricane Isabel. We've had a lot of real-time opportunity to make sure we're ready and we're prepared. Training, investments, resources, personnel and equipment. No region is better equipped than Northern Virginia, and no community is better prepared for an emergency than is Fairfax County.
And we live in an area that is a likely target in the event of terrorist activity. I mean, we've seen incidents. We saw the incident at the CIA headquarters. And while it was not a terrorist attack, nonetheless, it was a wake-up call.
Absolutely.
I've been privileged to see the Fairfax firefighters in action many times. One other area I think that's very important with them is the whole emergency medical services. 3/4 of what fire departments do today are emergency medical services. And again, people see a fire truck coming down the street. They don't realize that it often, in Fairfax, in every instance, it's filled with paramedics.
Absolutely.
You don't even need an ambulance to show up at your house. My children went to what National Geographic has labeled the most diverse high school in the nation, Jeb Stuart. Over the 30 years I've lived in Fairfax, I have seen not only the county grow, but grow in diversity. I think at the time my kids went to school there were about 45 different languages. Even in grammar school, when we had international nights, it was a feast of different tastes and delights that certainly I had never tasted before. Across the river, I don't think we've seen it in Fairfax. I don't think we've seen it in Arlington, Alexandria. But across the Occoquan, particularly in Prince William County, we've seen Corey Stewart, who's up for re-election down there, throwing some hand grenades across the river and looking to create a very divisive atmosphere when it comes to ethnic groups and when it comes to the whole issue of diversity. Let's talk about immigration a little bit. I know it's a hot point, and I know it's a sensitive point, and I'll tell you right now, I personally believe that the Republicans are using this as a wedge issue to draw attention away from some deficiencies that they've faced in other areas in terms of the leadership or lack of leadership that they have shown at the local level and the state and national level. What's happening here wait a minute, we've got a call. We're going to have to hold off on talking about immigration for a minute. We have Sydney from Lorton. Sydney?
Yes.
What can I do for you?
Well, I am concerned about the development down here. Like when is the hospital or the medical center on Lorton Road going to be done?
Will you repeat that question for me, Sydney? We didn't quite hear you. Say that again.
When would the medical center on Lorton Road be done?
The medical center on Lorton Road. Are you from?
Sydney, I have to admit, I don't know what medical center you're referring to.
It's like the one they have near the Franconia Springfield Medical subway station.
Okay, yeah.
And also one concern about the middle school.
Yes. With respect to the medical center, I don't know the timeline for that, but they are working on it in the Franconia Springfield area, and I believe we're working with Inova Healthcare on that. With respect to the secondary school, middle school in South County, I believe we need it sooner rather than later, and we have to persuade the school board to sort of move it up on their queue of priorities. I think there's a community meeting coming up soon, and if I have a conflict, I'll certainly send a representative, but I hope to be there myself. But I support trying to get that school as soon as possible. We're already over capacity at the high school, proving the demand down there. The South County part of the county is the fastest growing part of our community, and we have to address their school needs just like we have every other part of the county.
And I thank Sydney for that call, and we welcome your call at 571-749-1166. We're not going to have a lot of time to talk about immigration before the debate. We have, before the break, we have about a minute and 45 seconds. But let's get into it anyway. How are you dealing with immigration? There was a very good piece you wrote in the Post in the op-ed section about a week ago, I recall, a week ago today,
Right,
Sunday.
right.
Let's talk about it a little bit. You know, how should Fairfax address immigration compared to some of the reactionary measures we're seeing to the south?
Well, we've decided that we want to focus on behavior, illegal behavior and consequences, not on rhetoric and political posturing for sort of short-term, cheap political gain. So that's why I formed the strike force, to crack down on illegal boarding houses in neighborhoods and illegal commercial enterprises in residential communities. And it's making a big difference. That's why we focused on gang prevention and intervention, and we've got the results I talked about a little earlier, cutting in half the gang activity rate among young people in Fairfax County. That's an important thing. In our jail currently, the sheriff does detain people who are illegal, who are incarcerated for having committed a crime, and they are handed over to the immigration authorities. But there's a capacity problem, not on our side, but on the federal side in terms of their ability to pick people up, or their willingness even to pick people up. We already deny probably 2 or 3 dozen services to anybody who cannot prove legal residence.
And there are certain services you can't.
That's right.
That the federal government requires local governments to provide.
That's right. School education is one of them. The Supreme Court of the United States said we must provide education to every kid that shows up at the doorstep. So that one we can't check, but we can on food stamp and Medicare and housing assistance and so many other things we do, and we do.
We're going to hold off on the break for a minute. We have Tanya from Vienna here.
After the break.
Well, I guess we'll wait till after the break then.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
If you give me a fish.
If you give someone a fish.
You feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last couple.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop Virginia. My name is George Burke. Our guest today is Fairfax County Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Jerry Connolly, and we're going to go right into a call. We have Tanya from Vienna. Tanya, welcome. Maybe Tanya didn't wait for the break. We got another call. This is unusual, two at the same time. We have John from Mantua holding. John, are you there?
George?
Yes?
George, what a great show you have here. I wanted to ask the chairman, first tell him what a great place Fairfax is to live, and thank him very much for his leadership. But what are the two biggest differences between you and your Republican opponent?
He's asking, what are the two biggest differences between you and your Republican opponent?
Well, I think there are two major differences. One is my opponent kind of comes from a different era and has sort of an maybe older Republican view of what this community is all about. And I think we've changed a lot in the last 40 years. We're much more dynamic, much more economically successful, much more diverse as a population. 40% of Fairfax's population is minority. 27% of our population comes from overseas. And yet we're a much more vibrant and successful place. We have the highest median household income in the United States. We have one of the highest performing school systems in the United States. We have that AAA bond rating. We have the lowest crime rate. So by any index, we're a very successful place because of all those changes. The second difference, I think, is experience. My opponent seems to be a nice gentleman, but he's never shown up. I mean, I've never seen him at a hearing. Until this campaign, he's never been involved in community activities. He certainly hasn't been involved in public discourse. And, you can't just show up on the eve of an election. Getting involved in our community, regional leadership, you got to roll up your sleeves and put in years of effort and develop that experience that you can then put to good use for the people of the county.
I had seen the debate you had with your opponent at the Chamber of Commerce, and I had a reporter from the Post ask me what I thought afterwards. And one of the things, he described a Fairfax that I didn't know. I think he described a Fairfax that most of the business leaders and others in the audience did not know.
Right.
And I think it really hurt his credibility. I mean, it's like he's grasping for straws to find some kind of issue, and I don't see where he's going to make any traction dumping on the county we live in that has received so many accolades and so many awards for so long.
It's very difficult to persuade people we're going to hell in a handbasket when we are cited as the benchmark county in the United States. The day he did that, we just won an award as having the best website of any government in the United States. The year before, we were named the best digital county in the United States. A few weeks ago, as I said, we recovered our place with the highest median household income in the United States. The week before that, we landed Volkswagen Audi USA headquarters, shifting from Michigan to Fairfax County in the Dulles Quarter. So by every measure, Fairfax is the envy of the United States. There are two challenges we have to address to make it perfect. And that is transportation. We've got to get the state to step up to the plate and do more. And we've made some real progress this year. I was very proud to work with Governor Kane in trying to amend the bill, the Northern Virginia piece of the bill, to make it workable. And that's probably going to pump $300 or $400 million a year of new transportation investment into Northern Virginia, much of it here in Fairfax. I was very proud to work with the governor in that, and we have a success there. And then, of course, affordable housing is the other challenge. If you talk to any business leader, those are the two potential impediments to people wanting to come here or wanting to expand or invest here.
I want to address affordable housing some more, but we have a call from Fred in Springfield. We're getting a lot of calls tonight. Fred, go ahead.
Hello, George. I have actually a compliment for the chairman. I want to thank him for his strong stand on immigration and support for the folks who have come to Virginia and come to America. Our neighbors to the south, our neighbors to the west are saying some things, and it's very politically expedient, and it makes great headlines to say those types of things, but they're not helpful, and they're not doing anybody any good.
Tell the truth, Fred. They're actually, in many instances, out-and-out racist.
That's true. There's no question about that. And the chairman's standing strong, and I admire him for that, and a lot of people in the county admire him for that, and thank him very much every day for doing that. and he needs to be recognized for the credit he deserves on this issue.
Thank you very much. And I agree with you. Look, there are things, practical things we can and must do to crack down on illegal behavior, whether someone's here legally or illegally. But to essentially paint with a broad brush new arrivals to our community is to spread fear and anxiety in the immigrant community. And as I said, 40% of our population is minority, much of it immigrant, legally here, but they don't want to be made to feel unwelcome or uncomfortable. We're a tolerant, accepting, welcoming society in Fairfax. That's what's made us successful. And I'm not willing for sort of cheap, short-term political gain, frankly, to make anybody feel uncomfortable, any community feel unwelcome in Fairfax County. That's not who we are, and that's certainly not who I am.
This brings up an interesting story I heard last week. I ran into a friend of mine from the Hill. I literally have seen him maybe twice in the last 15 years. He now has young children. He has an au pair who watches his children, and she had traveled from Fairfax. She's a young Israeli woman, and she has an Israeli license, which she can have for 60 days, and then she has to get a Virginia license, but nonetheless, she maintains her international license. Well, she traveled into a neighboring jurisdiction to the south and was stopped for making an illegal U-turn or something, but it quickly evolved into a far different event where they were questioning her right to be in the country. They gave her a ticket or arrested, whatever they did to her, for driving without a license, and it got to be a tremendous brouhaha. And my colleague finally stepped in when he returned from out of town and spoke to them, and they apologized, said the police officer did not quite understand what the deal was, number one, and number two, that they thought she was Hispanic. And this is what bothers me so much, is that there are many people here, whether they're in Fairfax or whether they're in other communities in Northern Virginia, whom certainly have just as much right to be here as you or I, yet they're going to face some inquisitions at times because of their ethnicity, their color, etc. And I really don't think it's correct.
I would agree with you, George. Look, everyone who's here should be here legally, and everyone who is here should behave legally.
Correct.
We can do something about that. The federal government has to do something about the former condition, and the fact that 12 million people are in the United States illegally says volumes about the abject failure of the federal government to live up to its responsibilities. And we at the local level end up having to live with the consequences. And so we're coping as best we can. We're making investments. We're being aggressive, but we're not going to turn it into race baiting or racial profiling. That's not who we want to be.
In 1986, I drafted an op-ed piece that ran in the Times for a Democratic congressman from New York. And of course, the immigration was an issue even then. And we've seen very little change in the federal government's activities or positive actions on their part since then. But even then, he was arguing that if you want to be a sovereign nation, you have to have control of your borders.
Absolutely. And the federal government in this administration is going in the wrong direction. There was an article just a few weeks ago that the ICE, the Immigration Service, is diverting 1,000 of its agents to customs. So they're having fewer resources to deal with this issue in securing the borders and in making sure the folks who are here legally than we had just a few months ago.
One of the most startling things to me was the fact that that in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, ICE is only able to handle 40 or 45 detainees a month. And that's absurd. If they expect local governments to deal with some of these issues, where are they going to put them? Local governments are going to bear the cost.
Absolutely, and that means our local taxpayers. That's exactly right, George.
We have a call from Dave from D.C., who's apparently in Northern Virginia. Dave, welcome.
Thanks, sir. Mark Levine. Nice to hear. And Jerry Connolly, appreciate you very much.
Thank you.
I'm just listening to your commentary. The one thing that really troubles me tonight was when Mark Levine just now said, and I think it's probably true.
It's George Burke. Mark's not on tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just watching the television. It said Mark Levine's Inside Scoop.
Yeah.
I must apologize. What we have here is the commentary that you just said, that the people who oppose illegal immigration are racists. And I believe we really need to explore that more fully. Jerry Connolly, do you believe that the people who are opposed to illegal immigration coming into Washington, D.C. are driven by bigotry, racism, and just basically hate-filled? I'd like to hear the answer, sir. Thank you.
No, I don't, and I don't think George said that either. I think George was commenting on some of the overreaction by politicians who are trying to make some political headway by exploiting fears, anxieties, and some latent racism of their own or some others. But no, I don't think in any way, shape, or form anybody here in this program characterized concern about illegal immigration as racist. In fact, I think both George and I just finished saying the federal government needs to seal those borders. It needs to do something about illegal immigration. It can't just put the burden on local governments to somehow cope.
And I'll reiterate as well that every American, every citizen has the right to their opinion and the right to debate on this issue. I'm not arguing that. What we don't want to do is see, because of some people using it for political purposes, see it evolve into something beyond what it should be. So let's talk a little bit about teen drivers. We got a couple of minutes before the break. Personally, I believe that teenagers shouldn't drive. I've had 3 of them, and my cars have bear the scars.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is they are going to drive, and they get their first license. And I learned to drive on relatively rural roads. And so my mistakes were fairly safe mistakes. But learning to drive anywhere in the Washington metropolitan area is a challenge.
Yep. I think we take an enormous risk when we put a 16-year-old on the roadway of metropolitan Washington. And, I have a map in my office, George, that has every road in Fairfax County, and it has, where there's a little blue dot, it means there's been a teen accident there. Where there's a big blue dot, it means there have been multiple teen accidents there. And where there's a red dot, there means a young driver has been killed. And if you look at that map, it is pockmarked with blue and all too many red. 3 years ago, when I began the Teen Driving Initiative, 24% of all of the fatalities, auto accident fatalities in Fairfax County were teenagers. That's twice the national average as a percentage of the total. So we needed to do something about that. And so we started, we put together a summit, we brought together the stakeholders, we came up with some ideas, parent-teen driving contracts, making sure our judges have a ceremony to hand out that license, and they give them to the parents, not to the teen.
My kids went through that.
We got legislation trying to ban the use of a cell phone if you're a teen driver. Teens need, as you well know, and I'm the parent of a teen too, they need no more distraction. So we've done a lot to try to reform how we approach teen driving in Fairfax County, but at the end of the day, all of us as parents have to be more involved and take more responsibility for teen drivers. We're putting them into the second most congested roadways in America, and we're putting them into some of the most complex and difficult and dangerous roadways in America, and that means we have to be careful as parents what we're asking 16 and 17-year-olds to do.
All you have to do is listen to the traffic reports in the morning. We as adults have a hard enough time sometime negotiating these roles.
Absolutely.
We are going to take a break. We'll be back. Thank you for watching. My guest is Jerry Connolly, and we'll see you after the break in 2 minutes.
Some people in Fairfax County don't know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors,
Your friends,
or your family.
People who want to share ideas,
opinions,
Cultures.
Lifestyles.
art,
sports, music,
events,
entertainment,
History.
science.
beliefs.
People who want to learn about television,
Producing.
directing.
cameras, audio.
Lighting.
Editing, or radio, talk, music.
Whatever you think people should hear.
Public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
And it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
Whatever it is.
You can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people,
By the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop, Virginia. My guest is Fairfax County Board Chairman Jerry Connolly. We've been talking about a variety of issues, and now I want to zero in on education. Fairfax County has the 10th or 11th largest school system in the nation. It has a sterling reputation. I have 3 children who went to school there. You know, you look at some of the other big city school systems, whether they're New York or LA or Houston, and they have issues. I mean, every school system has some issues, but we've managed to avoid many of them. How do we do it?
Again, I think it's a great example of how our taxpayers have made very prudent investments that have paid off big time in terms of the return. We've built, as you said, George, the 11th or 12th largest school district in the United States. We've got 165,000 kids in it. It is very high performing any way you look at it. Our overall graduation rate for the full 4 years of high school is 82%. It's the highest of the 50 largest jurisdictions in the United States. Detroit being the lowest at 38%. Montgomery County's close to us, but we beat them by a full percentage point. If you're in high school right now, the chances of you graduating are 97%. If you're in high school and you're going to graduate this year, the chances are 94% you're going to go into higher education. The national average is 66%. You mentioned your kids going to Jeb Stuart High School. My daughter's in Fairfax County High School right now. All 24 of our high schools are in the top 3% list in America. And of course, Thomas Jefferson is consistently ranked as one of the top 5 high schools in America. But all of our high schools do well. Last year we had the highest SAT scores in our county's history. And we have, as was recently pointed out, in AP and IB and SAT, and more of our minority kids are taking those scores, those tests, and scoring well. So by any measurement, Fairfax County has a very high-performing and successful school system. If you are from Fairfax County and you're applying to get into college, that's going to be a plus in your favor because of the reputation of the school system. And that school system is critical to why we have economic success and why we have such equity in our homes. And it relates both to the crime rate and to the job growth we've had in Fairfax County. We now have almost 600,000 jobs in Fairfax County. When you and I first moved here 30 years ago, almost no one we knew worked and lived in Fairfax County. All of us worked downtown, that's right. And yet today, 55% of us on double the base live and work in Fairfax County. The schools are a key reason why that's true. When Volkswagen Audi moved here a few weeks ago, and they were asked, why did you choose Fairfax County? They had 14 jurisdictions around the United States they were looking at. The number one answer, our school system. It's the crown and the jewel. A jewel and the crown, excuse me.
Both from the perspective of they putting their own kids in school, but also the quality of worker that ultimately emanates out of Fairfax County and often stays here. We have another call from Tanya from Vienna. Tanya, welcome.
Thank you, George. How are you?
Good, I'm doing fine. What can we do for you?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, you might have already covered it, but my question is regarding illegal immigration and the jurisdiction, Prince William County, the decisions they've made in reference to dealing with illegal immigrants. Why do you think what Fairfax County is doing is more effective than what Prince William County is doing?
Well, Tanya, we covered it quite a bit, but I'd be glad to sort of revisit it in this respect. I think some politicians are suggesting that somehow if you're not on a soapbox and railing on the subject, maybe covering up the fact that you're not doing much about it, that somehow you don't care about the subject, and that's just not true. What I indicated earlier, Tanya, was that here at Fairfax, we're focused on illegal behavior and getting positive results. So if somebody's breaking the law, we're going to crack down on them. If you get into our jail system, we're going to make sure, if you're illegal, that the Immigration Service knows you're here, and we ask them to cooperate. Our sheriff already, on behalf of the Immigration Service of the federal government, detains over 330 people a year in our jail. We deny services to people who are here illegally. We formed a strike force, and my motion in the board earlier this year to crack down on illegal boarding houses and illegal additions to homes and the like. So we're actually focused on illegal behavior and getting results. But what we're not joining is the rhetoric, which I think is full of hyperbole and promises that probably can't be met. I think they're raising expectations in some jurisdictions they have to know they're not going to meet. George mentioned earlier the limited capacity of ICE, the Immigration Service. If you're going to be giving people the impression that you're going to be rounding up thousands of people and immigration is going to pick them all up next month, that's just not true. They can't and they won't. So focused on what we can do something about instead of railing against it and venting and doing nothing, I think is the preferable way to go.
You know, if you want to talk about rhetoric and the like, we're hearing these new packages now from the Republicans running in the General Assembly, all these plans, all these bills they want to introduce, when in fact, in the last session of the General Assembly, 27 bills were introduced and only 2 passed. They were the identical bill in either house. The Republicans had plenty of opportunity to advance these so-called plans at that time. That's why it makes me so mad, because it's clearly much of it is being, there are certainly problems that have to be dealt with, and I think we're doing it in a responsible way in Fairfax, but there is clearly a lot of political gamesmanship and fear-mongering that on the part of the politicians that does not need to be taking place and does not add to the debate nor make help make responsible decisions.
Absolutely, and you know, there are consequences when you do that. You know, I lived in Little Rock, Arkansas for first year out of college when my first job. And that was 14 or 15 years after Central High School, and they were still trying to live it down. Mm-hmm. They were still trying to explain to businesses why their investment climate was now acceptable. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Central High School, and Little Rock is still coping with the consequences of that kind of notoriety. You know, I think there's a better way to go that doesn't involve fear-mongering and doesn't make people feel legitimate immigrant communities who are here legally feel uncomfortable or unwelcome.
Or the many business people, the people who have started businesses or are here illegally and have helped Fairfax prosper. We have a call from Linda from Oakton, and we have another call behind that. Linda, welcome. What can we do for you?
Oh, hi. Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you this evening. I'd like to talk a little bit about the quality of life. We have a fabulous quality of life here in Oakton. We have a walkable community. We just opened a new library yesterday. And I'd like to know what the chairman has planned for the rest of Fairfax County to make that equal to...
Well, those of us who live in the Falls Church area would like to say we're already equal.
Well, you know, again, Linda, it's a good point, and I was pleased to be in Oakton yesterday for the opening of the library, and it's going to be a great focal point for the community for all kinds of activities, and we also were able to get a park for Oakton. I think focusing on the quality of life issues is very important. That's why the park initiative I've got, trying to make sure that 1 out of 10 acres in the county is parkland, very important. Depending on where you live, it could be a pocket park, it could be a very large park, it could be a playing field, whatever. But the community needs opportunity for recreational and public space. Looking at public art in Fairfax County. You know, I come from Boston, I went to school in Chicago. Both of those cities have done incredible jobs of taming the wilderness, if you will, with beautiful architecture and incredible art in public spaces. Even in a city like Chicago, which was once referred to by a poet as the hog butcher of the world. Well, if you go to downtown Chicago today, it's like a gallery. It's incredible, beautifully manicured parks with sculpture and so forth. We need to work on the quality of life here in Fairfax County. Everything from the kind of development we have to multimodal transportation opportunities, walkable communities, link us with sidewalks, link us with trails, link us with a green zone that runs throughout the county. That's why I was so pleased to support the Cross County Trail last year. I was the father of the Cross County Trail. We opened it. It's a new 40-mile trail that goes from Lorton in the south to Great Falls in the north. Huge new amenity that runs through every part of our county. So looking for opportunities to do that, I think, is a really important part of my job.
I want to apologize to Amjad from Falls Church. We're not going to be able to take his call. We only have 2 minutes left, and I'd like to give you about a minute of that time, a minute 30 of that time, to tell our viewers why you should be re-elected in November.
Well, I think being chairman is all about leadership. It's about an aggressive agenda that has been nationally and regionally recognized. It's about making things happen. It's bringing people to consensus. I'm proud of the fact that most of the votes in the Board of Supervisors have been unanimous in this 4-year time period. We've never seen the kind of consensus around an agenda that we have seen in these 4-year periods. And I'd like to believe my leadership had a lot to do with that. I love what I do. I have a passion for this community. I believe Fairfax County is the best community in the United States, and I believe we have empirical evidence to back that up, but I also believe our best days are yet to come.
Excellent. Jerry, I appreciate you having you on the show. It seems like we almost never have enough time on the show when you're on. And we'll do another one after the election. I want to wish you the best of luck in that election, and I think that we have some of the most educated and some of the, quite frankly, wealthiest voters in the nation here in Fairfax County. And I think that as certainly I've seen over the last 30 years, they are thinking voters. They don't go for the political ploys. They don't buy a lot of the rhetoric. They study the issues. They study the candidates. And they make that choice as an informed decision, not as a knee-jerk reaction. And I think that your success in the electoral arena is a credit to what you have accomplished, as much as certainly your political and rhetorical skills, but it's really about what's being done. Thank you and good night.